So here we are at the Woolpack in Cambridgeshire, where we've been for the last 6 weeks. We're getting towards, well, is it now middle of May? So the latter half of the spring season. And I've done the last 6 weeks on here, started beginning of April, which is the start of a lot of things nowadays, isn't it? New season start 1st of April. But looking at spring as a total, you know, 21st of March is the first day of spring, which is, let's face it, it's winter, isn't it, really? And 21st of June is the end of spring, which is, you know, practically the middle of summer. I don't think there isn't any season in fishing that's as transitional as spring. Everything changes. You know, you think of the tactics that you use in the second week of March and the last 2 weeks of March. It's winter fishing. It looks like winter fishing. There's no leaves on the trees. This year particularly, we had an awful lot of rain, we had loads of flooding, the waters were dirty, the water temperatures were really low because of the rivers coming in. Yeah, this place was flooded really badly. The syndicate I was on at the time, Barham in Suffolk, you know, it had been under 6 foot of extra water at times. The fish had all moved lakes, and you know, it's winter conditions and you're fishing accordingly with, generally at that time of year, when it's rubbish like that. I mean, March is not the top of anybody's hit list as far as months go. February is one of my favourites, but March is awful. And I tend to fish more at that time of year. Either, if I'm fishing on the bottom, I'll be fishing with singles, proper bright smelly ones, you know, over flavoured, knock your head off, you know, see a mile off. Singles totally on their own. I mean, you hear people talk about singles and say, yeah, I've got 3 singles out there with a little spread of bait over the top, but they're not singles, are they? But that time of year, quite often I'll fish single baits if I'm anywhere near the bottom, or I'll be fishing zigs, because in my mind, the best zig fishing starts around March. You know, that's when the fish are not comfortable on the bottom for any great period of time, and spend fair proportion of each 24-hour set impacts somewhere in the mid layers. So zigs they're like a big part of my armoury for that early part of spring, but even they change very quickly. You know, there's a third dimension to zig fishing. Obviously, you've got different levels. And I think generally, in my mind, I tend to think of the fish higher up earlier on in March and then working their way to the bottom. It's not that simple, but that's a, you know, a basic rule of thumb. Now, when I'm zig fishing, I like to fish normally. I split the depth of the lake into 3, and it's that central third column. That's where I target my zigs. But for the first part in March, you quite often find you get a couple of nicer days and the fish will be right up near the surface in the top 2 foot. You know, you can get some good early bites in that top 2 foot of the water. But over the next, and it's only a couple of 3 weeks, you know, as you start getting into April, I always find that central third is the most productive area for zigs. And like I say, if I'm fishing on the bottom, I'm fishing with hinge rigs, really, bright ones on hinge rigs. You know, I do a lot of my fishing with Ronnie rigs, but I tend to present them a little bit later in the spring when I'm finding spots. But in that sort of last 2 weeks of March, first 2 weeks of April, I'm looking for fish, any signs of fish whatsoever. And if you've got a hinge rig, especially on a helicopter rig with the bead pulled right back, it's like lure fishing. You can cast that absolutely anywhere. You know, you see any sign of a fish, anything, the slightest rise, just a little head and shoulders or a nose or something. Hello, Ted. This is the lake's dog. Let me introduce you to Ted. Ted's my new friend. He comes to visit me most days because somewhere I've got a little pack of dog treats for him. So, like I say, the beauty of that fishing, you know, with your hinge rigs, especially on a helicopter rig, is anything that shows, anything that pokes its head out, anything, even if it's what I call a UFO, which is an unidentified fishy object. You know, if you're not sure if it's a carp, tench, but whatever. At that time of year, it's worth casting at everything. If you're only using that attractor bait method, like I said, it's almost like lure fishing. You haven't invested anything. You haven't got a bed of bait here. You're not, oh, I don't want to move that rod because it's, you know, it's on a nice spot. That's not the way I fish in early spring. It's just moving around the lake. You know, if I'm somewhere and I see a single fish show at the other end, I'm quite happy to get up there, chuck a single on a hinge and a zig next to it and fish like that. So it's opportunist fishing for those first couple of 3, maybe even 4 weeks of official spring, from March the 21st till maybe the middle of April. And around the middle of April, you know, a little bit dependent on the weather, but not so much so. I think it's more down to light levels. Things change, you know, fish change their behaviour. Say the mid-level zigs start working an awful lot better. I tend to go away from just slinging hinge rigs at anything that shows and try and find not so much spots to put bait, as in, you know, a pound or a kilo of bait or whatever, but just a you know, 1 catapult full of 10 millers or whatever around it to make sure I've got a half sensible spot to fish on. And fish like that for a couple of weeks, very lightly baiting. And before you know it, the zigs sort of, they lose their effectiveness. The fish are spending a lot more of the time nearer to the bottom of the lake, and they're actually searching out food. I mean, you know, you've gone from the middle of March to the middle of April, you've got a 4-week period and everything's changed quite a lot. If you then take that forward another, just 4 sessions to the middle of May, you know, where we are now, I'm now fishing over bait. Not lots of bait, but an amount of bait, finding spots with markers, baiting it up, setting traps. You've got more of a definitive bite time at this time of year as you sort of get into May. You're looking at evenings, very, very early morning before light, into light, and that first couple of hours till about, let's say, 8 o'clock in the morning are your prime times, and your days are pretty much dead, to be honest. You know, now it's probably midday. I'm not expecting anything to happen now, and I'm forward planning. I'm looking for signs of fish, where they might be, what they might be doing for tonight and mainly tomorrow morning. So I'm probably going to move today. I'm not sure where to yet. I'll spend a couple of hours walking around the lake, maybe longer than that. Last week, for example, I spent one day 8 hours walking around the lake. I saw 2 fish the entire time, both luckily in the same swim. Set up in that swim about 5:30, something like that, tea time. 6:30, I had a mid-30 from where I'd seen one of these fish. So, you know, that observation throughout the day, forward planning. I wasn't desperate. I didn't cast when I saw them. I actually cast out 3-4 hours after I'd seen the fish, because I knew it wasn't a feeding time, and I was just storing that information, you know, throughout the day of where I was going to forward plan to fish for the next set, the next bite time, if you like. So you've gone in that little bit, 2/3 of spring, you know, you've gone from fishing singles and zigs and slinging everything and not really having any set plan whatsoever, to the middle of May, now having that plan, you know, finding spots. My phone's already, this is my first year on here, on the Woolpack. As I say, I've been on here 6 weeks, and my phone is now full on my notepad on my phone of, you know, high bank swim, second tall tree to the left, 9.3 wraps, and I'm learning the spots and writing them down and keeping a good record of them. And I think that's really, really important, because fish anywhere are petrified of the sound of a lead. They hate it. You know, you cast on fish, you're likely to spook them. You get one cast in, you're going to get away with that. If you don't know the swim and you cast 10 times where a fish is showed, trying to find a decent spot, it's over before you've started. But by keeping a record, now I think there's something like maybe 11 swims on this lake. I think I've got 5 of them already nailed down. I'm not saying they're the best spots, but they're fishable spots, and some of which I've caught from, because I've already had 7 fish, I think, from this lake. So, for example, if fish start showing in the evening, even after dark. Last week I moved at 10 o'clock at night, and I removed at 2:30 in the morning. I know that's a little extreme, but I was aware I wasn't where I wanted to be, and I could see where the fish were. Now, if one of the swims that the fish turn up in turns out to be something that I've already mapped out and got on my phone, then there's no disturbance, is there? There's 3 casts. I literally look on my phone, see the tree, see the wraps, pop, 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 plop, and I'm on them. I'm on showing fish with the minimum of disturbance. And that's how I'll fish the latter half of spring, if you like. And if you go to the, right to the end of spring, up to the 21st of June, you've got totally different fishing. By then, you're getting up pre-spawning. You're fishing over bait, proper bait by then. You're putting in quite a lot of bait in the first couple of weeks of June. So to me, I think the spring's the most interesting of all of the seasons. I mean, I love them all, especially autumn, but in autumn your tactics don't change a lot. You might use a little more bait as you get deeper into autumn, but you're already fishing on whatever your chosen rig is. Mine happens to be a Ronnie rig at the moment, but whether it's bottom baits or whatever, you're fishing on the deck over bait and all you're changing is maybe your location and your quantity of bait. But in the spring, you've transitioned from scratching for a bite, proper scratching for a bite, to fishing flat out on bait and hoping that they hold the spawning off as long as possible so you can catch them at good weights. It's just such a brilliant time of year to fish. And it's not only the fishing that changes, obviously. Just here in the 6 weeks I've been here, when I started on here, it was not barren because it's a beautiful lake, but it wasn't as green and stunning as it is now. Every time I come back, so I fish every week, this time of year I fish for 3 nights, so I'm only away for 4 nights, and it's noticeable 4 days later or 5 days later when you come back. Bushes that you were looking at the week before have suddenly, they're all in full colour, all the reeds are changing from that sort of burnished browny colour, pale of the winter, that all the green stems are coming up. You can actually see the green coming up from the water level as they colour up. All the ducks have got ducklings, all the geese have got goslings. It's stunning at this time of year how everything changes and how quickly everything can change. So yeah, all in all, I think spring is the most interesting season of the lot to be on the bank, to be a carp angler. And I just hope that today we can have fish to show you, hopefully, or if not, maybe tomorrow morning. $31.9. Another proper original. He's a proper saddleback. He's got a very dipped back, hasn't he? He's gorgeous. Gone from absolute despair to absolute elation. Now nothing matters. Hurrah! Life is good again. Away You jolly well go.